Welcome to Trial by Wine. We take a closer look at crimes that highlight how fascinating humans can be. Schmitty, Swanee and Clarky visit crimes and run them through their jury of three, debating both sides of the case to agree an appropriate, if totally fictitious, sentence. Please be advised, Trial by Wine may include explicit or disturbing content and will include drunken rambling. Listener discretion is advised. All right, how are we?
Really?
Yeah.
Edge of my seat.
For those of you who listened to last week's episode, this is a carry-on because we like to carry on.
That's right. Yes, exactly that.
And also because Clarky brought us I was going to say meatiest, but that's a bad choice of phrase.
Oh, God.
The most extensive case I think we've covered so far. And so we are probably going to, if everyone's okay, skip all the what have we been doing because we didn't do anything because I literally pressed stop, said goodbye, and we've started again. So yes, we're doing a back-to-back because Clarky's brought us the most prolific case ever.
Yeah.
But before we crack on with where we end up with this one, what are we drinking?
Oh, well.
Well, we've got a carryover Prosecco. Just so you know, it's an Italian Prosecco, which is delicious. It says handpicked, and it says some words in Italy that...
Handpicked by you when you pulled it off the shelf.
Well, no, it says some words in Italian that I literally can't even be bothered trying to focus on because we started pre-gaming before the last episode. So we are polishing off our third bottle.
And the last episode took 3 hours to record.
Correct.
So
some of that first bottle and some of the second bottle was helped. We had a friend help us out with. So, it's not like we've had a bottle and a half each. But these Russian words are not going to get easier to pronounce.
Not getting any better.
I'm about to move on to a Moby prep because I've got a day procedure tomorrow.
Oh!
What do you mean a Moby prep?
I know what you mean, I think.
It's colonic irrigation. It cleans you out so that you can have a camera.
It doesn't sound like a good idea to have been drinking before that, but okay. All right, that's probably TMI, but anyway.
Hang on, you say that, but we did look at it extensively, and it's called the white diet, and as long as you have white things, it's okay, other than milk.
Oh, so Prosecco's white. Yeah, okay.
Right. So we did do a red, we did do a rosé.
Specifically Google alcohol, and it said you can have a moderate amount of alcohol. So
which we have done.
By the time you clean out your bum sack, everything.
We've had a couple of moderates amount of alcohol. Anyway, enough about us.
Well, speaking of people who've had too much to drink.
Speaking of bum sacks, I thought you were saying Tony's coming in to join you.
I don't even know where I got bum sack from. I think it's a bum crack, but I'm on my sixth cruiser now.
I'm glad. Because I didn't know what
a
a bum sack was. I thought I missed something.
It was
I thought that's something you could pop, like Lance or something.
Oh, Lance, your bum
Clarky,
sack.
didn't you once have a bum sack? Anyway, that's another story.
I did.
I know. It's another story. Let's not get onto that.
Well, it wasn't a bum sack. It was a little hole. Remember that?
Remember you had
fistula?
that thing?
A fistula, yeah.
A fistula. It's like a...
A fistula.
That's exactly what I was thinking of when I went to Sacré-Cœur and they had a lovely fistula. I mean, funicular.
Anyway, enough. Yes, there's something significant about to be announced.
I'm drinking.
Trumpets.
And I'm drinking a lovely rosé that Schmitty gifted me because I think she's so desperate for you to drink, and it's my favourite, and it's a Côte de Provence Rameau d'Or is what it's called, and it's lovely. Yes.
And the reason I'm so desperate for you to drink is that you come and you record and you talk about your hangover from the night before and then you never drink with us. And I'm like,
well, I know, it's not that I don't drink, but I can't.
I know,
it's because of the timing and doing stuff for children. It's very difficult for me to
understandably.
We completely understand it. Now it's
time difference and everywhere else, but
because of the time. Yeah, because of the time difference, it's now over 4 o'clock for you.
Yes.
And you have listened to 3 hours of
yes.
blood and guts and grease off the rod. So it's time. Do you remember that SARD's ad?
I do.
No, I don't.
Blood
I
and
don't.
guts and
grease off the
when
rod.
he comes
I don't know
home with
that.
blood and guts and grease off the rod, I need Massard's Wonder Soap.
I probably should remember it, but I've not heard that. But
it was an older lady talking about cleaning off, and she
when
was
her
really talking
husband
about
came home from fishing.
Fishing, yeah.
And
anywho, and murder and rape.
So nothing to do with Vaseline and penises.
And just before we move on, I'm Schmitty.
I'm Swanee.
And I'm Clarky. And together we are
Trial
by Wine.
And a little bit loose today. Okay.
Oh, a lot
Clarky,
loose.
tell us more about our
what I
next
want
part of
to
our
know
story.
is, does anyone want to do a quick recap on what happened last episode, or would you like me to do that?
You
do
do.
it.
Oh, I'm happy to do it.
Go on then, but do it in jest.
Oh, of course. Okay, so we start out talking about this bloke, right? And his name's
Andrei.
Chikatilo, you and I know. Andrei Chikatilo, right? And we all felt sorry for him for a while because he had a really shit upbringing. He had to share his bed with his mother, and he was a bedwetter, and she smashed him around a bit, and he got bullied at school, and, lots of bad things. And then we think, oh, no, things are turning a corner. He's academically bright. Everything's okay. And then it turns out he can't get a hard on. And that turns out to be a pathological issue for him. And he has subsequently gone on to kill, and we're up to 49. So I think we've now covered in the last episode, 49 exceptionally gruesome, exceptionally awful crimes against
Murders.
children, both male, female, women, just everyone. And we're also, the other side of this story is we're talking about it's a cultural context, I suppose, of the USSR at the time, where we didn't talk about these things, and that, serial killers weren't a thing in Russia because it was a kind of political play, which led us to not actually find this guy, not actually stop these things from happening. And more importantly, where's the rest of the community? Because this has been going on around people. And Carla, Map Lady, in the last episode,
Map lady.
was looking at, geography gal, if you like.
No, map lady's good.
Was looking at kind of a lot of this happens in kind of the same place. So why aren't people even more concerned about it? So is that an appropriate, do you think that was a good roundup?
Yeah, I think it was very good. I did have one question for you, which was,
Sure.
did we actually establish that I'm probably half Russian due to my exceptional pronunciation?
I think anyone who's listened to the last episode, they'd know that.
Oh, okay, right. So
they
we're
would
going to
get
go
that
with
straight
that
up.
answer.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
They would. How could they
yes,
not?
obviously,
How could they not know?
I thought you were an eighth German.
Well, I think I'm an eighth German.
I'm going to go so far as to say the half that you are Russian is the bottom half, because what's coming out of your mouth? Rude, I know.
Wow. I find you impertinent. Come on, Leonard, we're leaving.
Sorry.
Right,
Okay.
so we've discussed a lot of his murders and a whole lot of kind of, quite frankly, unbelievable stuff that has shocked us all and pushed us to the point of inappropriate humour. We're now going to talk a little bit about the journey towards catching the killer.
Well, thank God for
So, as we already spoke about, there were significant resources dedicated to the search, but as the discovery of more victims continued, it sparked an even bigger police operation. Because several victims' bodies had been discovered at railway stations on one rail route through Rostov Oblast, Burakov suggested a plan to saturate all larger stations in the region with an obvious uniformed police presence, which the killer could not fail to notice. You might think how ridiculous, but the point was that this would discourage him from operating at these stations and push him to smaller, less busy stations, which would be patrolled by undercover agents.
Oh, smart.
Ununiformed.
Smart.
So it's super clever, right? I actually think this is a really
It's quite a good
smart
plan, yeah.
plan. Yeah.
Smart. Yeah.
The plan was approved and implemented shortly thereafter. The uniformed and undercover officers were instructed to question any adult man in the company of a young woman or child and note his name and passport number. Police deployed 360 men at all the stations in the Rostov Oblast, but only undercover officers were posted at the three smallest stations on the route through the oblast where the killer had struck most frequently: Kundrucha, Don Leskov, and
Kombucha.
Kundruk.
You said kombucha. I'm like, what? That's that half Russian. Yeah, go on.
Kundrucha.
Kundrucha. Okay.
That's your half Russian hearing, but between my half Russian pronunciation and your half Russian hearing.
Okay.
In an effort to force the killer to strike at one of these three stations. The operation was implemented on the 27th of October 1990. So you've got this operation going on across all of the train stations on this route, 3 train stations policed with undercover police so that he will be forced to kill at these train stations.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
A lot smaller stations too. Yeah.
So it started on the 27th of
You'd
October.
think not forced to kill, but, to hunt perhaps. But okay.
It started on the 27th of October. 3 days later, on the 30th of October, police found the body of a 16-year-old boy, Vadim Gromov, at Donleskov station, which is one of the 3. The wounds upon Gromov's body immediately linked his murder to the manhunt. The youth had been strangled, stabbed 27 times and castrated, with the tip of his tongue severed and his left eye stabbed. Gromov had been killed on the 17th of October, 10 days before the start of the initiative. So that was
so they just found his body.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
3 days, but 3 days after, right, they'd just go, my God, are you kidding me? He's already done it? And then I guess retrospectively they'd work out that it
had already happened.
Okay. The same day Gromov's body was found, so the 30th of October, Chikatilo lured another 16-year-old boy, Viktor Tishchenko, off a train at Kirpichnaya station and killed him in a nearby forest. So Kirpichnaya wasn't one of the 3, but I'm not sure where it sits on the line and whether it was being policed or not. And he was killed in a nearby forest. Tishchenko's body, bearing 40 separate knife wounds, was found on the 3rd of November. On the 6th of November 1990, Chikatilo killed and mutilated a 22-year-old woman, Svetlana Korostik, in Woodland near Donleskov station. So again,
it's working well, isn't it?
One of the 3. I know, right? But imagine all of these resources, and it's still happening.
I know.
Yeah,
but wait for it. After the murder, Chikatilo returned to the railway platform where he was spotted by an undercover officer named Igor Rybakov. Now, old mate Igor was an effective detective. He observed Chikatilo approached a well and wash his hands and face. He also noted that Chikatilo's coat had grass and soil stains on the elbows. Chikatilo also had a small red smear on his cheek and what appeared to be a severe wound to one of his fingers. To Rybakov, he looked suspicious. The only reason people entered woodland near Donleskov station at the time of the year was to gather wild mushrooms, a popular pastime in Russia. But Chikatilo was not dressed like a typical forest scavenger. He was wearing more formal attire.
Wasn't dressed like a mushroom man. Yeah.
Forest scavenger. It's such a good term. Moreover, he had a nylon sports bag, which was unsuitable for carrying mushrooms.
Yeah, you got to take a brown paper bag.
Yes,
I put my mushrooms in a bloody plastic bag when I bring it home. What?
They just sweat.
I like to carry my mushrooms in a string bag. I certainly won't do it in a nylon bag because I'll sweat.
Inappropriate.
I wouldn't know. I don't eat mushrooms anyway. Rybakov stopped Chikatilo, obviously because of this contradiction, and checked his papers, but had no formal reason to arrest him. Remember, he was not aware of any murder that had taken place on that day. When Rybakov returned to his office, he filed a routine report containing the name of the person he had stopped at the station and the possible smear observed upon his cheek. On the 13th of November, Korostik's body was found. She was the 38th victim linked to the manhunt. Police examined the reports of all men stopped and questioned in the previous week. Not only was Chikatilo's name among those reports, but it was familiar to several officers involved in the case because he had been questioned in 1984 and had been placed upon a 1987 suspect list compiled and distributed throughout the Soviet Union. This provided police with a clear suspect, and they began checking with previous employers about his movements. This placed him in various towns and cities at times when victims linked to the investigation had been murdered. They also questioned former colleagues from Chikatilo's teaching days and discovered that he was forced to resign from 2 teaching positions due to repeated complaints of lewd behaviour and sexual assault made by his pupils. Police placed Chikatilo under surveillance on the 14th of November. In several instances, particularly on trains or buses, he was observed approaching lone young women or children and engaging them in conversation. If the women or children broke off the conversation, Chikatilo would wait a few minutes and then seek another.
Ugh. Oh, it's so creepy.
It's so creepy, right? It's just
gross.
like, all those stories that you heard in the 80s of dirty pedos and stranger danger and all of that. He's
It.
He's
a
just
pin-up
got it
boy.
all going on.
Yeah.
He's well up there.
So I have a story, not related.
Of course you do. About the kid you killed?
No, nothing to do with me doing anything bad, but it's interesting. I have a memory, and I know this happened. It's not a false memory. When I was about, I reckon it was 85.
We're recording, don't you?
Yeah, I do, and I think it's
Okay.
pertinent to this.
Okay.
85 or 86, I was in grade 5 or grade 6, and I remember being with a schoolmate, and we went to the zoo, and it was one of the few times that we went without we'd been to the, I think it must have been grade 6, because we'd been to the zoo. It was really great, and I asked Mum if I could go to the zoo with this schoolmate of mine, and we did. And when we were there, you were talking earlier about him giving people sweets and things.
Yeah.
This guy, there was a man there, and he bought us both an ice cream. This is not a major confession, because I didn't do anything wrong, but, well, apart from being a bit naive. But
I mean, it was only a BJ, right? And an ice cream's an ice cream.
Bloody hell, Paul.
Well, you make that joke, but this man, not that I went on to perform any sexual acts with this older man.
God,
It would have been,
Schmitty.
I'm thinking probably, I mean, I can't really remember, but he would have been maybe 50s, maybe. And I remember him
He was
talking
probably
to us.
30.
He was a pedophile groomer. He was a grooming pedophile. In hindsight, as an adult, I look back at it and I go, He talked about how he worked with delinquent kids and kids who are, vulnerable. And he said, and I remember him saying quite clearly to myself and to my schoolmate, I work with these girls, and, he said something along the lines of, and if they, I try to help them and I listen to them, and if, they're all confused, and if they want to have sex, I'll have sex with them. And then he gave me a business card to call him.
Are you serious? How old were you then?
This is 1986, 1987, so
Wow.
not far. So when I've been thinking about this the whole way through this story, thinking, do I talk about this anecdote?
God,
now,
if I had
obviously,
called him.
Well, of course, I wouldn't have called him, right? But I didn't know he was. I just knew I got a total creepy vibe. But as you're talking about this stuff, I'm thinking he could have been a murderer. He could have been.
You could have got some vodka and relaxing times.
I'm quite confident that he probably was a pedophile and a rapist. But as we talk about this, I think, oh my God, he could have actually been a murderer. Yeah, well, where else would you go? It's a great place to pick up kids, isn't it? In the 80s.
Well, not to steal them. I must say,
he wasn't trying to steal us. He gave me his card, which I thought, in hindsight, risky, right?
Yeah.
If I'd given that to Mum.
Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy.
Crazy.
But here's my
But
number.
here's
So
call me, maybe.
Yeah, it's funny now because I didn't call him and there was no major issue. But I've thought about that.
Also, not funny. I mean, funny in the context of this podcast and this story, but
it's not really funny. And so we talk about this situation. Back to your point, Carla. Where is everyone and all the rest of it? But and I talked earlier about the innocence of this period of time. We went home. I never said a word to Mum about it. I had his card, and I thought that was a bit weird. But we got a free ice cream, and what they say, no such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah, or ice cream,
ice cream. Yeah,
as you learnt. So you reckon was that Melbourne Zoo?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a story from around the same time.
Right, but let's get to yours.
Which was about a girl who she would have been Melbourne Zoo, no more than 16.
I was 12.
It's not serious. No, but what I'm saying is, so it was about 86, 87.
Mm-hmm.
And she went to the toilet, and so it's not serious like yours. She came back laughing, and we're going, what's funny? And she goes, oh, my God, I went to the toilet, and on the back of the wall was written, here I lay all covered in red. I'll kill the mole that stole my med.
Stole my med.
Yeah.
A tampon.
Yeah,
tampon,
it
yeah.
had. Because that was...
I love that you've remembered that. That wasn't the only place that was written. It was written everywhere.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's the only time in history I've ever heard that.
No,
Was that written everywhere?
I'd forgotten it.
Swanee's like, I went around in 86 and 87. I wrote that everywhere I could go.
I
I
do
love
remember
it. I
that.
think that's like a one-off, and you've gone, it's just
Nah,
everywhere.
dirty moles are writing that everywhere.
Anyway, I guess the point of my anecdote was you were talking earlier about, how he lures people and all the rest of it. And I thought,
Yeah, no, correct. And also
what do you
your
call
good
it?
judgment.
Sliding doors.
One of the things about this is that, this is in a time when there's a lot of poverty and a lot of,
it's
adults
different.
who are struggling, and therefore children are struggling, and children probably don't have a lot of people to connect with or talk to because their parents are struggling so much. So old mate turns up
Mind
friendly.
you, in the 80s, we went broke, right? So there was a fair amount of struggling going on in the Schmidt household. So I'm not saying it was nothing like the USSR. I'm sure it was really bad. But the point is there are people out there, be careful, kids. That's all I'm saying.
Correct. Exactly
Has
that.
it dawned on either of you yet that for all of the atrocious murders that he's committed, which were so violent, why was he never spotted with blood on him?
Yeah.
Like, you would be covered in it. I don't
It's a
get
really interesting point, and there was talk of that. So he used to wear a long coat, and then what they suggested was that he took his coat off before any of the blood
And then the coat would cover everything
and then he
up.
put
And
the
then covered himself up. Yeah.
coat back on again. Yeah.
I guess he's got a black coat and it's got blood on it you can't really see, but he's doing it in the summer months.
Yeah, no. I think it was literally that he had that.
But he's not witnessed much either. So there's the KGB picture. There's a few people who see him taking people away. There aren't many people who talk. Yeah, he's very good at it. There's not many people who speak about him after, except for that last one, the policeman that you talk about.
But also, I think, he's talking about getting them at train stations, and they're being murdered elsewhere.
Away.
And
He's not necessarily returning to the train station.
No, and it took them a while to realise about the train station, and then, there was a little bit of investigation. Nothing happened. So they've kind of gone to the train station, nah, not that, gone back again, and really gone, all right, it has to be this. So on the 20th of November...
No one was looking. No. Anyway, sorry.
I also think that probably speaks to maybe the Soviet at that time, how you viewed other people, whether you wanted to stay out of trouble, keeping yourself to yourself. I don't know.
Well, the movie certainly said that there was a disconnect between what the police and the investigators thought, not the police, what the detectives and the agents and whatever, and what the government who actually employed them were telling them. So, they're going, we need to do all this, and they're going, not a hope in hell.
But I just cannot believe by not telling the public what they were up against. It was always the same. And I'm probably jumping away. I can't believe it.
But is it any different now? Like, I mean, I don't know a lot about communist politics, but I do have a sense that...
Oh, is it any different there now versus here?
What I'm saying is, correct, there, now.
Okay.
I think communist politics is all about the state running of things and, silencing the noise.
Yep.
So
that's what I'm saying. I can only imagine that these things helped him.
Correct. Well, that's exactly what happened, yes.
100%.
So on the 20th of November, after 6 days of surveillance, Chikatilo was arrested by 4 plainclothes police officers. Upon his arrest, Chikatilo gave a statement claiming that the police were mistaken and ironically complained that he had also been arrested in 1984 for the same series of murders. What's that? Oh, not
He's
again.
a bullshit artist.
I'm such a victim.
There's been 55,000 between then and now. That's not
But
the
also,
same series of
you
murders.
thought I was guilty then and now you think I'm guilty now. It's because you were guilty then and you are guilty now. Like,
Could you just call my wife? She'll tell you I was home all the time.
Correct. A strip search of the suspect revealed a further piece of evidence. And I don't know why it needed to be a strip search, maybe because it was cold.
Dun, dun,
In fact, it was November, so it would have been cold. One of Chikatilo's fingers had a deep flesh wound, and he had self-treated with iodine. Medical examiners concluded the wound was from a human bite.
Ouch, ouch, ouch.
Chikatilo's
also
second
good.
last victim, Viktor Tishchenko, was a physically strong youth. At the crime scene, the police had found numerous signs of a physical struggle between the victim and his murderer. Chikatilo's finger bone was later found to be broken and his fingernail had been bitten off. However, Chikatilo had never sought medical treatment for this injury. A search of Chikatilo's belongings revealed he had in possession a folding knife and 2 lengths of rope. A sample of his blood was taken. As the police case was largely circumstantial at this point, they wanted to find more information so they could connect him, to areas and whatnot, but there was nothing concrete. So under Soviet law, they had 10 days in which they could legally hold Chikatilo before either charging or releasing him. They developed a plan to place him in a cell in KGB headquarters in Rostov with a police informer who was to try to elicit as much information as he could, and ideally a confession. The plan was to convince Chikatilo he was in need of medical help due to his mental state and that if he confessed, he would not be prosecuted by reason of insanity. Throughout the questioning, Chikatilo repeatedly denied that he had committed the murders, although he did confess to molesting several of his pupils. He also produced several written essays for Kostoyev. These did not provide details of the murders, however, they did reveal psychological symptoms consistent with those predicted by Dr. Bukhanovsky in the 1985 psychological profile he'd written. On the 21st of November, the results of Chikatilo's blood test again revealed his blood type to be type A and not type AB. Police were so confused. There was so much physical and circumstantial evidence which indicated Chikatilo was the murderer, but they just couldn't get over this sort of connection or disconnect between the two types. Investigators decided they needed to test a sample of his semen to see if that produced a different result. I mean, imagine being the person who had the job of collecting semen.
Well, you can't get it out unless he gets to stab someone several times.
How'd that...
70-something times. Like, how do you even extract it?
Oh, maybe a needle into his bulb sack? I don't know. I hate to think.
That'd be the epididymis.
How does that work? Oh,
the results... bum sack.
His bum sack, yes.
Whatever it is that Caroline's created.
Oh, don't.
It was bum sack, yeah.
So the results of his semen test revealed that he was type AB.
Aha! Not
whereas
type A.
his blood and saliva were type A.
Hey, how does that work?
How is this possible? I hear you ask.
That is what I just asked.
Do you remember episode 44, which was titled Non-Secreta Madness?
Secreta, non-secreta. Yeah,
So
okay.
That
was me, wasn't it?
Yeah. So he was a non-secretor, which meant that his blood type is different to that of other bodily fluids.
Right, there you go.
Oh, I didn't know that was part of it. There you go.
Boom.
Yeah. So I actually, Swanee, I Googled that several times in different ways because I was going, is that what we discussed a non-secretor being? I don't recall that at all.
To be fair, I didn't understand it at the time, but, hey.
You're a non-secretor all the time, haven't you?
Yeah,
is that what you're saying?
I'm not a jizzard wizard, so of course I'm a non-secretor.
I've literally got nothing for that. That is, oh goodness me.
Anywho.
I always thought you were Jizzy Lizzy, but despite all of that, the police were looking for a confession. So on the 29th of November, with time running out, Dr. Bukhanovsky was invited to question the suspect. Bukhanovsky read extracts from his 65-page psychological profile to Chikatilo. The profile had many similarities, and with 2 hours, Chikatilo burst into tears and confessed to Bukhanovsky. In the movie or one of the documentaries we watched, he spoke a lot about the upbringing and the humiliation and the challenges he had, and then the need for release and all those sorts of things that probably spoke to Chikatilo in the way that he then
Understood.
related to.
Do you think it went like this? Chikatilo, tell me the truth. I'm a shoulder you can cry on. Your best friend. I'm the one you must rely on.
I am now going to have to Google.
You are always sure of yourself. Now I see you've broken a finger.
Broken a finger.
Oh, God.
Can't see.
I hope we can patch it up together.
Far out,
Anyway.
Schmitty. After this, I'm going to Google what the motivation for Chikatilo was, because it could very well be this.
Sorry, go on.
So bear in mind, they've got 10 days, right? So they arrest him on the 20th of November. They've got 10 days. On the 29th of November, he breaks down in tears. So they've got one more day to either arrest or release.
Arrest him or let him go, yeah.
So Kosteyev prepared a formal accusation of murder dated the 29th of November, the eve of the expiration of the 10-day time period, which Chikatilo could legally be held before being charged. The following morning, Kosteyev resumed the interrogation armed with Bukhanovsky's handwritten notes. Chikatilo confessed to 36 of the 38 murders police had linked him to. Although he denied 2 additional murders committed in 1986. One of these victims was Lyubov Golovaka, found stabbed to death on 23rd of July 1986, and whom many investigators had serious doubts about linking to the manhunt. The second was Irina Pogoryova, found murdered at Bataysk on the 18th of August 1986, whose mutilations closely matched the other victims.
Why did they not think Irina was one of his victims?
Oh, it's hard to say, because I think there was just a lot of confusion and without specifics. So so some of them were excluded because of the eyes, and we'll talk about the eyes soon, because that just wasn't consistent with a lot of the earlier murders. So Chikatilo gave a full detailed description of each murder on the list of charges.
Oh, God, could you imagine listening to that? Oh.
So, Swanee, to your point, did he have a book or anything?
Yeah.
All of his
Photographic
descriptions
memory.
were consistent with known facts. When asked, he was able to draw rough sketches of the crime scenes, including a position of the victim's body and various landmarks in the vicinity of the crime scene. Additional details provided further proof of his guilt. For example, Chikatilo claimed one victim named Anna Lemesheva, who was killed on the 19th of July 1984, had stated that a man named Bars, which means leopard, would retaliate for his attacking her. Lemesheva's fiancé had the nickname Bars tattooed on his hand. In describing his victims, Chikatilo falsely referred to them as lower class. He discussed details of his MO. He would bind the victim's hands behind their back with a length of rope. He would typically inflict a multitude of knife wounds upon the victim, initially inflicting shallow knife wounds to the chest area before inflicting deeper stab and slash wounds, usually 30 to 50 in total, before proceeding to eviscerate the victim as he writhed atop his or her body until he achieved orgasm.
So just to be clear, he was eviscerating them while they were alive.
Yeah,
Yes.
so this is when we were talking about the orgasm piece, it was until he achieved orgasm, then he would kill them. So
nice.
the suffering was all about the orgasm, then it was, I'll murder them.
Oh, God.
And, of course, the longer it went on, the longer it took him to achieve orgasm. So as his later victims, I can only imagine they suffered more than the earlier ones. Chikatilo had, he stated, become adept at avoiding the spurts of blood from his victims' bodies as he inflicted the knife wounds and eviscerations upon them. Once the murder was done, he would regularly sit or squat beside his victims until their hearts had stopped beating.
Oh,
Stating,
no hurry to get out of there.
Stating their cries, the blood and the agony gave me relaxation and a certain pleasure.
Yeah, it's more than just orgasming. It's He's enjoying it all now.
It's like the cigarette you have after sex, right? He's just sitting there listening. Like, it's gross. There's no... It's so messed up. And so my joke around the cigarette, right, I think, sometimes couples will have sex and then they'll lie in each other's arms, or they might, have a cigarette. He's
Roll
sitting
over,
there
ask him to pull
listening
your
to the
nightie down.
agony and suffering. What's that? Ask him to what?
Pull your 90 back down.
Oh, goodness.
Pull your nightie down when you're done.
I've got a cramp. Can you fold
Sorry.
my legs back down? Because I shouldn't be in this position. Like, do you fancy a root? No, thanks. Do you mind lying there while I have one? Like, it's
Did the same, yeah.
You're terrible, Muriel.
Yeah. Anyway,
I think you taught me that.
that's what I said.
So, as we spoke about earlier, you may be wondering why so many of his earlier victims' eyes had been stabbed, slashed, or removed.
Yes.
Well,
Here we
Chikatilo
go.
stated, that he had initially believed in an old Russian superstition that the image of a murderer is left imprinted upon the eyes of the victim. So the police would be able to see that it's him because his face would be reflected in their eyes. He added that in later years he'd become convinced this was simply an old wives' tale and he had ceased to gouge out the eyes of his victims.
enough of
no
that
one's doing
shit.
that.
That's so
nowadays.
time-consuming, and I've just got to get out of here,
God.
right?
I know. I don't have that. That's adding nothing to my experience, so I'm just going
I'll
to.
park that over there.
I'll take that out of my repertoire.
But so remember,
I'll park that.
for all the jokes, remember that some victims were discounted because their eyes weren't mutilated.
We're
Weren't,
intact.
yes.
Yeah.
We're still in their sockets anyway.
Yeah.
So Chikatilo also said he had often tasted the blood of his victims, to which he stated he felt chills and shook all over. He was losing control.
It
'cause
sounded
the
like he
power-
felt chills and then a Russian name, Shukalova. Just checking.
Oh, Schmitty,
He
you are
felt
terrible.
chills
and
and
shook
shook
all over.
all over.
He
Right.
felt chills.
He felt chills.
and shook
and
all
shook
over.
all over.
We're all going to hell.
We totally are
Absolutely.
in a handbasket.
He confessed to some seriously bad acts, so tearing at victims' genitalia, lips, nipples, and tongues with his teeth, cutting or biting off the tongue of his victim as he performed his eviscerations, then running around the body as he held the tongue aloft in one hand. He admitted that he had chewed upon the excised uterus of his female victims and testicles of his male victims. Only chewed. He didn't swallow.
Didn't eat them.
But he did confess to having swallowed the nipples and tongues of some of his victims.
I'm a serial killer in Russia. Get me out of here. I mean, come on.
I'm a citizen in Russia. Get me out of here. Like, far out. On the 30th of November, Chikatilo was formally charged with each of the 36 murders he confessed to, all of which had been committed between June 1982 and November 1990, so 8 years. That's the 36 murders he'd confessed to, right? So 36 murders in 8 years. Over the following days, Chikatilo confessed to a further 20 killings, which had not been connected to the case, either because the murders had been committed outside the Rostov Oblast, because the bodies had not been found, or in the case of Yelena Zakotnova, because an innocent man had been convicted and executed for the
this
murder.
first one.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Again, he was able to provide details of these additional killings only the perpetrator could have known. In December 1990, Chikatilo led police to the body of Alexei Kobatov, a boy he had confessed to killing in August 1989 and whom he had buried on the outskirts of a Shakti cemetery, proving unequivocally that he was the killer. He later led investigators to the bodies of 2 other victims he had confessed to killing. In total, he confessed to 56 victims. 3 of these could not be found or identified, and so he was only charged with killing 53 women and children between 1978 and 1990. So 53 in 12 years. Like, it's...
Jesus.
That's 4.5 a year kind of thing. Like, it's off its head.
No, but as we covered, some of them were in 1 year, like, tons. And then a
tons
break
in 14
and
in...
then,
Not like, yeah.
Jesus.
So police needed to determine if he was mentally competent to stand trial, obviously because that was something that was going to come up if they didn't So after their interrogation was complete, Chikatilo was transferred to Serbsky Institute in Moscow to undergo a 60-day psychiatric evaluation. Chikatilo was found to have various psychological problems linked to prenatal brain damage. So there was actually, I can't remember if it was water on the brain or something, but something that he had that was prenatal that they said possibly connected his behaviour as a result of the things he'd experienced to what had happened. He was found to have a steady but gradual descent into perversion, which had been compounded by biological and environmental factors. It was concluded that although he suffered from a borderline personality disorder with sadistic features, sadistic features, it sounds like it's, I've bought the latest.
In it, yeah.
Well, I've bought the latest Tesla and it's got sadistic features. But they did determine he was fit to stand trial. In December 1991, details of Chikatilo's arrest and a brief summary of his crimes were released to the newly privatised Russian media by police.
I wonder how brief it was.
So let's talk then about his trial. How do we feel about that? This is his trial not by wine, Schmitty. You can save his trial by wine for a little bit later. Chikatilo was brought to trial in Rostov on the 14th of April 1992, charged with 53 counts of murder in addition to 5 charges of sexual assault against minors committed when he had been a teacher. He was tried in the Rostov Provincial Court before Judge Leonid Akubzanov.
You're nearly there.
Don't you think that the difference between like a crime where you're in a situation where somebody's, murdered people through an act of terrorism, let's say, where a bomber's exploded and, they've wiped out 200 people or they've brought a plane down or whatever else, there's a moment that it usually happens within which is pretty swift. And this is the total opposite, where it is each individual has had a prolonged period of suffering. Each single person has a total murder story. And that's what is it, 53?
53 that he's admitted to.
No, he admitted to 56.
That's right, and they only
but he's been charged for 53 because I can't prove the other 3. But every time I get, you're right. Every time I get on a plane, I think if this is my moment, let it be quick.
Yeah, and it probably will be.
So I think one of my worst things is when you're on a plane and I literally have moments where, I go to the toilet and I think, oh God, if some idiot opened that door, I'd get sucked out and I'd be in pitch black, in freezing cold and I'd fall to my death. And
I never think that, but I really wish I'd never heard you say that. I don't think that.
Yeah. So Chikatilo's trial was the first major media event of post-Soviet Russia. Can you imagine that shit show? Investigators...
Post-Gorbachev or around Gorbachev?
Pre-Gorbachev.
Pre-Gorbachev.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, I think so. It's 1984. Oh, no, sorry, 1990. Oh, it would be close to Gorbachev. Gorbachev. Bit of a problem on his
1991.
Look at Mark on his head. Then on the back. Straight the onions.
Oh, so is it Yeltsin? This is Yeltsin's
Yeltsin,
period.
I reckon it'd be. Oh, was Yeltsin pre-Gorbachev? That was Gorbachev, then Yeltsin, wasn't it?
Yes.
I think it's the other way. Yeah.
Is it?
I thought Gorbachev.
Oh, no, it's in The Crown.
Gorbachev first. I don't watch The Crown, but I thought Gorbachev was first and then Yeltsin. Hang on,
I reckon it was Gorbachev and then Yeltsin.
I think Boris
You're
comes
quite
out.
right, yeah. So
Boris comes out,
Gorbachev would have been in power at the time. In 1991, they tried to overturn him. Yeah.
So investigators had conducted a press conference outlining a full list of Chikatilo's crimes, alongside a 1984 identikit of the individual charged, but not the full name or a photograph of the accused. Their first sight of Chikatilo was on the first day of his trial, where he was contained in an iron cage specifically constructed to protect him from attack by the enraged and hysterical relatives of his victims. There was talk of the fact that the courtroom was packed by 250 people every day, and people getting turned away because they wanted to be there generally because they were connected to his crimes in some way, not because they were just general public and wanting to make sure that he got what he deserved. In the opening weeks of Chikatilo's trial, the Russian press regularly published exaggerated and often sensationalistic headlines about
Wouldn't
the
have needed
murders.
to. They would not have needed to.
Correct.
But they referred to him as
Brutal
being a cannibal.
and horrific killer.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't eat them for
he chewed on 'em.
sustenance, but he chewed on them. That's enough,
but he liked to try new things, right? He wasn't a cannibal. But they did refer to him as being a cannibal or a maniac, and to his physically resembling a shaven, skulled, demonic individual. And the piece I take from this is the first major media event in post-Soviet Russia around a serial killer. And it's incredible how quickly they learn to influence public opinion. You know, we've spoken about this with a number of Western crimes, but this is the first chance they've had to report with credibility, and they've gone straight to what happens in the West anyway. But to Carla's point, they didn't need to. This was like the first one, and it was horrific. Just report the facts, and you'll get the same
in the eyes, cuts off the lip, tongues, uterus, ball sack, all of it.
Oh, chewing on testicles,
breasts, all of it. You know, like nipples.
I haven't had a nipple for a while.
The only thing he didn't do, it appears to be, was remove an anus, but everything else was fair game.
Schmitty, he wasn't
to what end?
To what end?
You sound like the Russian police in the early 80s now, thinking he's a homosexual.
I think it'd take a fair bit of work, wouldn't it? Even as a butcher, wouldn't you have to flip it over and...
It took a bit of work to take a uterus out, I'm sure.
True, you're right.
Well, once you stab someone 70 times, I feel like it probably almost jumps out itself.
That's not how uteruses work, but okay.
Right. The first 2 days of the trial were devoted to Akubzanov's reading the long lists of indictments against Chikatilo. So literally 2 days he spent reading the indictments. Each murder was discussed individually, and on several occasions, relatives present in the courtroom broke down in tears or fainted when details of the relative's murder were revealed. Imagine how hard it would be sitting through 2 days of that.
Oh, awful.
After reading the indictment, Akubzanov announced to the journalists present in the courtroom his intention to conduct an open trial, stating, "Let this trial at least teach us something, so that this will never happen again anytime or anywhere." Akubzanov then asked Chikatilo to stand and identify himself. Chikatilo complied, although this would prove to be one of the few civil exchanges between the judge and Chikatilo. Chikatilo did himself no favours during the trial, responding to specific questions with dismissive replies, particularly as to the wounds he had inflicted and the ruses he had used.
Could you imagine being the families and finding out what had happened?
And he's in the cage to protect him.
Yeah.
To what end? Just... Ugh. On one occasion, when asked as to his seeming indifference as to the lifestyle and gender of those whom he had killed, Chikatilo replied, "I did not need to look for them. Every step I took, they were there," which is basically saying there were plenty of people. I could just,
I'll be honest, he wasn't wrong.
It was smorgasbord.
Because they didn't. They were innocent people, not thinking that someone was there, weren't aware that there was a madman amongst them to try and kill them.
It's true he wasn't wrong, but it says a lot about society when back in that space, in that time, when he could just go and choose what he wanted. And that was, it kind of feels like that.
Yeah, it's true both of him, and it speaks volumes as to sort of the arrogance that he had, because it was so easy for him to do it, and he believed he could just keep doing it. And as you say, the public as such, who were totally unaware that was happening. And even if they'd been made aware, as you say, it was still a different time.
He's just like this massive shark, and there's all these seals everywhere in his mind, and it's just like there's nothing stopping him from just predating on everything.
But I think in the SEALs' minds, there's the government and the police who will do that. I think we get, in the 80s for us, it was unlikely someone was going to kill this many people in this short period of time, because you'd like to think that the police would eventually catch up with them. Chikatilo's responses to questions deviated into his discussing issues such as the repression his family had endured throughout his childhood, and claiming that the charges filed against him were false. In what became a regular occurrence throughout the trial, Akubzanov berated Chikatilo, ordering him to shut your mouth before adding, "You're not crazy."
Shut your mouth.
Shut your
Shut
mouth.
your mouth.
Shut your mouth. I think
Shut your mouth.
Shut your mouth. You shut your mouth. I would like to think that it went like that. So he actually had to say to him, "You're not crazy," because presumably Chikatilo was saying, "I'm crazy and this is not fair and you shouldn't be treating me like this." So these verbal exchanges would occur whether Chikatilo was cooperative or uncooperative throughout proceedings, and the manner in which the judge questioned Chikatilo repeatedly led to his defence lawyer, Marat Khabibulin. Marat protested the nature of the court proceedings. Chikatilo would shout over the judge, denounce the court as a farce, and launch into rambling, disjointed speeches. On occasion, Chikatilo would also expose himself to the court or sing socialist movement anthems throughout proceedings. These antics regularly resulted in his being returned to his cell as the court proceedings continued in his absence. So it's a bit of a farce. On the 21st of April, Chikatilo's defence lawyer requested that Bukhanovsky be allowed to testify, as he could exert influence over Chikatilo and, by extension, might influence the court proceedings. This request was denied. The same day, Chikatilo began to refuse to answer any questions from the judge, the prosecutor, or his own defence lawyer. He refused to answer any questions for 3 days before stating his presumption of innocence had been irredeemably violated by the judge and that he intended to give no further testimony.
Because he wasn't innocent. But okay, fine.
The following day, proceedings were adjourned for 2 weeks. I mean, imagine that being one of the victim's family members.
You think, what?
And he's going, wah, you're irredeemably violating...
You think I've done it, and I haven't.
Although I said I did before.
I mean, I did say I did, but now you're treating me badly.
I'm going to say I didn't.
And you presume that I'm guilty, even though I said I was.
Even though I said I was guilty, yeah. Is it a presumption or is it an assumption when you've said you've
And does
done
it even matter? Because you said you did it. Although, to be fair, there are plenty of people who said they did it earlier who didn't do it. Chikatilo withdrew his confessions to 6 of the killings on the 13th of May, and also claimed he had killed 4 further victims. The same day, his defence lawyer again submitted a request that his client be subjected to a second psychiatric evaluation. This motion was dismissed by the judge as being groundless. In response, the defence rose from his seat, condemning the court and arguing that the judge was unfit to continue presiding over the case.
Oh.
Of course, Chikatilo repeated his earlier remarks as to the judge prejudging his guilt. However, even the prosecutor, Nikolai Gerasimenko, why do I do this to myself?
Nailed it, yeah.
Vocally supported the defence's claim. He further contended that in his conducting an open trial,
the judge had prejudiced it.
Yeah, he had Chikatilo had already been effectively prejudged as being guilty by the press before also requesting that the judge be replaced. Now, I can understand that if
in isolation,
if he hasn't confessed.
Yeah, exactly. I hate this shit. I judged you as guilty because you said you were guilty. So can we just move on?
But also not just that, right? Because remember, other people said that, but he knew specific details about crimes. He took them to crime scenes.
Pretty comfy-wumpy that you're a psycho killer. Sure, yeah.
Mofo, yeah.
Qu'est-ce que c'est?
Psycho killer.
On the 3rd of July, Bukhanovsky was permitted to testify. For 3 hours, he gave his testimony, and 4 psychiatric experts from the Serbsky Institute also testified. All testified as to his behaviour in the courtroom being strikingly at contrast to his behaviour in his cell, and that they considered his antics to be a calculated attempt to obtain acquittal on the grounds of insanity. So on the 9th of August, the defence delivered their closing arguments before the judge. Khabibulin questioned the reliability of the forensic evidence presented.
Kerry Bullen.
Kerry Bullen.
Girl, Kerry Bullen.
Kerry Bullen sounds like one of your dad's mates from down at the pub. Kerry Bullen. He runs a transporting company. Kerry Bullen.
Yeah.
Kerry Bullen and Associates.
Yeah, real estate agent. That's what I heard. Kerry Bullen.
I'm going to try to mumble it in another way so that
maybe
I
a
sound
Russian
more
way?
credible. Khabibulin. Does that sound more Indian than Russian?
Indian.
I'll take it.
Okay.
Schmitty, how would you say it?
I have no idea how you'd say that.
questioned the reliability of the forensic evidence presented at the trial and describing areas of Chikatilo's confessions as being baseless. He also questioned the judge's objectivity and harked back to the decision of the court not to allow the defence to present testimony from independent psychiatrists because they wanted to, despite the original psychiatric 65-page thing and then his 60-day thing, they wanted to introduce other people, emphasising that the crimes of this nature could not have been committed by an individual of sane mind.
Well, duh.
Kerry Bullen then formally requested the judge find his client not guilty.
Nikolai Kerry Bullen, if you don't mind.
I think he had a beer in his hand when he did it too.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, mate.
Kerry, we've been talking about this for a long time.
Enough.
And he's been talking a whole lot of bull and shit.
I'll tell you, old mate, this is what we're going to do.
And it's time we put an end to it. The following day, prosecutor Anatoly Zadorozny delivered his closing argument. He spoke of the earlier testimony of psychiatrists at the trial and argued that Chikatilo fully understood the criminality of his actions, was able to resist his homicidal impulses, and had made numerous conscious efforts to avoid detection. Moreover, Zadorozny...
Who in this Russian tale is Mr. or Mrs. Morova? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that was the tennis player.
Moreover.
Zadorozny emphasised that in 19 of the charges, the material evidence of the crimes had been provided by Chikatilo himself. Zadorozny then recited each of the charges before formally requesting the death penalty. Chikatilo was given the opportunity to make a final statement on his own behalf. In response, Chikatilo simply sat mute. As court announced recess, the brother of Lyudmila Alexeyeva, a 17-year-old girl killed by Chikatilo, we spoke about her earlier, threw a heavy chunk of metal at Chikatilo, hitting him in the chest. So remember, he's in that guard cage thing, and someone still got to him.
Brilliant.
When security tried to arrest the young man, other victims' relatives shielded him, and he managed to get away. Yeah, like well played. Yeah. Well played.
Well, you know, we are all about, you know,
retribution.
Inappropriate response. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, I would have said if you had thrown it at him and killed him, I'd be okay with that too. On the 15th of October, Aksubanov formally sentenced Chikatilo to death plus 86 years for the 52 murders and 5 counts of sexual assault. Chikatilo kicked his bench across his cage when he heard the verdict and began shouting abuse.
He's like a bird, like a budgie. His water bowl across his cage.
His bell and his mirror.
His bell.
You're a bunch of shit kickers. However, when given an opportunity to make a speech in response to the verdict...
Why was he given any response? Was it not
He again remained silent.
Why was he given a chance to say anything? That's wrong.
Oh, you know, like such is life.
Sorry. Whoops.
Okay, so upon passing final sentence, Judge Akubzanov made the following remark. Taking into consideration the horrible misdeeds of which he is guilty, this court has no alternative but to impose the only sentence that he deserves. I therefore sentence him to death. Chikatilo was taken from the courtroom to his cell at Novocherkassk prison to await execution. My pronunciation of that's gotten worse.
Great job.
Nailed it. Bang on. He did lodge an appeal against his conviction with the Supreme Court of Russia, but this appeal was rejected in the summer of 1993. Following the rejection of his appeal to the Supreme Court, Chikatilo filed a final appeal for clemency with President Boris Yeltsin. Schmitty?
That'll be a no. Yeah.
This final appeal was rejected on the 4th of January 1994.
Good.
On the 14th of February 1994, Chikatilo was taken from his death row cell to a soundproofed room. I'm going to say it again. I'm going to murder it again.
In the prison.
Novichokhovsk prison.
Yeah.
Novichokhovsk prison, and executed with a single gunshot behind the right ear. He was buried in an unmarked grave within the prison cemetery.
That's quite extraordinary.
I must say, I like the way they do that.
The idea of shooting someone behind, like just shooting them in the back of the head. Whenever I think of a firing squad, I think of, several people shooting forward.
Yeah.
I never think of someone just coming up and popping you one in the back.
No,
like
so they were very clear in the wording. They didn't state it specifically, but old mate was killed by a firing squad. He was killed by a single shot behind his right ear. I actually quite like that way of killing people. If you're going to do it, you have to see all the ones where that goes wrong. It's hard to get that bit wrong, I reckon.
And it's pretty hard if you do like shoot through someone's brain, but because even gas chambers and injections, some of those go, and electric chairs go terribly wrong.
Yeah, correct.
To the point where it's just cruel. In trial by wine world, we'd be fine with it with some of these people, but not in the real world. So
yeah. All right, so I'm going to now tell you just a little bit of closing stuff about murders that were included and excluded, and I want you to think of this in the context of a math problem at high school where, if I'm on a train that's going at 150 kilometres an hour and I eat 3 bread rolls and 7 people get off and 28 people get on, what's the temperature kind of thing? Because I kind of struggle to do the math, and math, Carla's, we know that we've lost you already.
Maps
but
and
I'm actually okay with it, but I found it quite confusing. So anyway, just strap yourself in, Dal. So Judge Leonard Akubzanov cleared Chikatilo of the murder of 15-year-old Laura Sarkisian at his trial due to insufficient evidence. Sarkisian, a runaway from Armenia, was last seen by her family on the 18th of June. In his confessions to police, Chikatilo had stated he had killed an Armenian girl in the early summer of 1983 and that she had been killed in a stretch of woodland located near Kirpichnaya station. Although Chikatilo had been unable to identify Sarkisian's picture when presented to him, the timing of Sarkisian's disappearance and Chikatilo's physical description of the victim, her clothing and where he had killed her did match scattered partial skeletal remains and personal effects, which, although determined as being those of a female in her early to mid-teens, could not be precisely identified. Although he had at one stage denied having committed 6 of the murders for which he had been brought to trial, Chikatilo never specifically disputed Sarkisian as being a victim of his. So then there's suspected victims. So Chikatilo confessed to 3 additional murders which police were unable to verify. According to Chikatilo, these 3 murders were committed in and around the city of Shakti between 1980 and 1982. Despite his confessions, police were unable to either match his descriptions of these victims to any missing persons reports or locate any human remains, despite thoroughly searching the locations where Chikatilo stated he had committed these murders. Therefore, he was never charged with these 3 further killings he claimed to have committed.
He did them.
Chikatilo is the prime suspect in the murder of 18-year-old Irina Pogoryalova. I feel like I just murdered her surname.
Pogoryalova. Anywho.
A court secretary from Bataysk who had disappeared on 11th of August 1986 and whose body was found buried in the grounds of a collective farm on the 18th of August. Instead of using her surname, I'm going to say her body bore precisely the same mutilations found upon victims Chikatilo killed both before and after 1986. In his initial confession, Chikatilo had denied he had killed her, yet later insisted at his trial that he had indeed killed her. And this is part of it, right? He's kind of in, out, yes, I did, no, I didn't, I'll mess it all up.
He did it. He did it
You
all.
know, like which ball's the cup under kind of thing. So at his trial, Chikatilo claimed he had committed 4 further murders in addition to the 53 for which he was brought to trial. So that presumably 3 of these victims were the 3 he'd initially confessed to having committed in 1990 and which police were unable to either locate or match to any missing persons records. The 4th individual he specifically named as arena.
And then he went on to say he killed her.
Correct. So if his claims of having killed 4 additional victims are true, the total number of victims Chikatilo claimed is 57.
Yeah.
So you've got he claimed 56, possibly 57. He was charged with 53, convicted of 52. Like this is the math problem I was trying to talk about, right? Like
Swanee can't cope with it. I think he killed 57 people. He's claimed 57 victims. I'm quite happy. I get the legal process can't prove that he killed more than 53. I'm happy for him to say, I killed all these people. I'll take it. Well, I don't understand your problem.
I don't have a problem. What I'm saying is I think that there's legal process in the way that all that works, and there's trial by wine, and
That's
I think
right.
that
Yeah, I'm ready
I could
for
happily
trial by
lump a
wineness.
few more on him, right? Like
The 152, what were the numbers earlier that we attributed to all these other homosexuals and
all of that.
pedophiles? He can have all those too.
So that's the story, right? We are 4.5 hours in to what is a fairly lengthy story.
Well, I'm ready to sentence this motherfucker, frankly. Swanee?
Yep. Although I'll struggle with what I'm going to do.
We've had 4.5 hours to think about it.
And I'm still in a state of shock.
Yeah.
I will admit, I struggled with determining a punishment for this individual that is as bad as the things that he's done. Because, you don't want to be as bad as the criminal. But then I got over myself somewhere between victim 49 and 53.
Somewhere between mango chutney 4 and 7.
87. When she says victim 49,
And a bottle of red.
I think Schmitty's lining up her empty mango chutney bottles as victims.
Oh, seriously. There's 8 down there. There's 8 dead bottles down there. And Tony brought in some red for me. And I'm like, probably shouldn't have it. But anyway, I'm ready to sentence. Do you want to
Go
hear
for it, Tony.
Go.
And like a historic punishment. So I went back and said, what's the worst punishment of all time, most excruciating? Because, this guy's cutting off people's bits. He's just awful. He's torturing them. And I think we finally, after 3.5 to 4 hours, worked out that he was doing it before he ejaculated. Drink.
Bingo.
Bingo.
Ejaculation bingo.
Yeah.
That old game.
Is that where you put the card in front of you? They've got to try and see how many numbers.
Is that your son still behind you, though?
Just take a drink.
No, just my
At
dog.
any rate, so what's the worst thing I could do for this individual? Because we've had a couple of breaks, we've done 2 shows. I cannot even, from the first nipple slicing, cutting off, biting off, to the last pair of testicles, lips,
cut off.
just everything. And then when you said he definitely did all this until he bingo ejaculated, I decided that he's got to suffer. He's got to, I can't just say death penalty's enough. It's not. A shot behind the ear is enough to stop him being a threat to humanity in this life.
Yep.
So in Trial by Wine World, I'm going to introduce a new, really awful, sick punishment. I'm going to thank a colleague of mine who talked about this the other day. So have you ever heard of Cryle Castle?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
Up near Ballarat, that way?
Near Ballarat, Carla, someone has built this, replica medieval
Shit
castle.
Yeah.
Medieval castle.
Medieval, yes, like medieval dates. It's from medieval.
Cryle Castle's this medieval castle, right?
Medieval.
And this guy I was talking to the other day was telling me how when he was a child, and he's about my age, he went to Cryle Castle. I've never been there. He went there and he said he was scarred by what he saw. And at one point,
What did he see?
Well, they had this, wench come out who'd done the wrong thing, and they pulled her dress down and they whipped her in front of everyone. And obviously they had paint or whatever it took to make her look like she was getting a good flogging with blood and blah, blah. And as these little kids, they were horrified.
Family entertainment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Quick, take the kids. I swear we went on school excursions
Sunday afternoon
to Cryle
excursion,
Castle.
probably. Sounds like it.
But worse yet, he said he remembered this bit where they went down into the dungeons and there was this whole conversation about what they did to the medieval, Carla, the medieval punishments for people. And one of them was rat punishment, rat torture. Rat torture consists of putting a box of rats on the person and then heating up the box of rats so that the rats have nowhere to go but to eat into the
way
body.
out. Oh.
And I know
That was
I know.
this castle? That is family fun, isn't it? Poor child.
He was telling me about how scarred he was, and I was like,
I don't doubt it.
Oh my Lord! But
I love it.
Honestly, I think
I
that was
love
part of
it.
the
Hang on to that
syllabus back then. I swear that was part of the syllabus.
And I thought to myself, I swear to God, that's got to be something I hang on to for trial by wine. And here I am, because this man has tortured people. His ejaculation, drink.
Bingo.
Far out, Schmitty. I can barely sit up anymore.
Point is, you put the rats on him, and they eat and scratch into him because I think
You
that'll
put the lime in the coconut and drink it all down. You put the lime in the rats on the stomach and heat them all up.
He put the rats in the stomach and they crunch it all down because the kind of shit that he did was horrendous, terribly innocent victims, so many families, so many people impacted. I mean, that's the worst I can think of. It's probably not the worst
it's
in the
bad,
world.
though. I'll give you
It's
that.
bad though. But also, of course, it's in perpetuum, so it's a version of hell. That's my
Well played.
slightly lame, I think, but the best I can come up with
How
because
do
I'm
you-
so
how do you-
It's hard
traumatized.
to outdo him. It's just
Exactly. I'm so traumatized by him.
I
Yeah.
think for me, I've sort of looked at it in two tangents, and one of the things is I'll just park him for the moment. I think if there's any other sort of entity within the story that I would like to punish, it would just be, and I don't know if it's the government that I'm focusing this on, but I think you'll understand what I mean. It's the agencies that were so instrumental in keeping it from the public, because I think that in doing so, it went on and on. And I mean, the rate that he was killing at, it wasn't like it would happen once or twice a year. It was, within the next 10 days we've done this, and then the next 2
3
weeks.
days later,
flurry
or
of
2
them,
days
yeah.
later.
Insane. And to be honest, it's not to say that even if it had become public knowledge, that it would have been able to save the people who are on sort of the,
fringes.
the fringes, the outskirts, the fringes, that's it. One glass of wine and I'm terrible.
Fringe Festival.
But
Oh,
feel
come
like-
on, Swanee. I've had 8 mango chutneys.
I know,
and
you
a
can
glass
tell
of wine.
who the seasoned drink is. It's not me. So I think, maybe that would not have saved them. But I think if there was, I think it was in their duty of care to their people to let them know that this was happening. If it was a wild animal, and that was how he was
100%.
behaving, they would have to do that.
They would seriously. If it was a wild animal, people would have gone out and shot wolves.
Correct.
Like people would have hunted for this.
Shot possums.
They didn't know that there was this absolute savage beast, because that's kind of what he was. Well, very much what he was actually.
He was.
Yeah,
absolutely.
well, why?
He was essentially.
Yeah.
He was mauling people and doing the most horrendous things to them. I think it is. I cannot believe I don't know about it. I think it's probably one of the worst stories I've heard. It is just so upsetting that I actually feel, I don't know, it's kind of really belittles it to sentence someone. But so I think I'll say that with respect to the government, I think they absolutely did the wrong thing. That bothers me hugely. And with respect to him, I don't know that there's anything that you could do to someone like, how I often try and go back to see what this person was like from a psychological point of view. What were their triggers? What was something that they were so desperate for that they couldn't get? And then whilst we've been doing this for the last 4.5 hours, I did have a little peek, and there's one quote that I found at one point that I can no longer find, but he's referencing the psychologist who did that first profile that Clarky talked about in part 1. And he said that person was his best friend, because that person is the only person who ever understood him. He got him bang on.
Yep.
And I don't know how I can create a punishment within that, but it just speaks volumes. He said, I never had a friend, ever. No one ever understood me. I was on my own. I have just been bullied, harassed, all these things through my life. So terrible. I struggle with this because I know where I know where he's at, but how do I then punish that? I don't know there's a punishment for it. The punishment was the life that he lived, and then he just inflicted on everybody else. So my only punishment was he didn't exist. That's all I could come up with.
Well, you unmake him,
Which is useful,
or
yeah.
you say at some point we veer his life away, and this never happened. So it's sort of like unmaking, but he gets to be a complete nobody and live a normal life and not be a serial killing wanker that he was by...
For want of a better word.
Well, no, the exact words, right? Because that's what he was doing. He was serially killing people in order to ejaculate, drink.
Here's the Master Maz.
Schmitty, next time I see you, I'm going to punch you because you have said that word too many times and made me drink.
And yet I didn't do it for so many hours. I'm a good girl, really. I think, to your point, Swanee, that could have been turned earlier. He had no friends. He had no one.
Yeah.
I don't feel sorry for him.
It's not an excuse, though, is it, to then be so brutal and, the victims that he chose, the women, the young girls, the young boys, it just breaks my heart. I feel really...
9, 10-year-olds.
Yeah. And the most horrific deaths you can imagine. I can't.
Well,
really come up with anything.
you would put a dog down if they showed signs of these sorts of things, but no one saw it. I think that's the problem.
That's weird, isn't it?
That's the weird bit. 53 to 57 victims and no one saw it.
Oh, I can't get past it.
Take us home, Clarky.
Remember, this story came to us because we were talking about the name change from Coon to Cheer and Fags to Fads and Redskins to Red Rippers.
Oh, it all seems so pedestrian now.
So my first sentence is to Allens, who used to make Redskins, who then decided that Red Rippers would be a better name.
I like it.
How about the Red Ripper?
Well, they didn't do their due diligence, did they? Someone should.
So there was a
all they
song.
do is Google it.
There was a song called Nude School by Painters and Dockers back in the 80s, I reckon. But I want to send Allens to Woke School. But I think at some point we need to stop pointing out all the things that are wrong and start to point out all the things that are right. And I would say that, I'm not overly comfortable with a family name of Coon having to change their name because it offends Indigenous Australians. Yeah. I'm absolutely supportive of the fight that Indigenous Australians have, right? So I don't
100%.
I don't want to devalue that, but I think it's their name. It's their family name. But also then the transition from fags to fads, I don't know.
I don't know any gay person, and I know a lot of gay people, but I don't know anyone who.
But what I'm saying is that I think there's people who aren't.
How do you feel about fairy penguins?
Well, I always thought they were fairy penguins. Now they're little penguins, and I don't understand why. But apparently because gay people were offended by it because of the use of the word fairy, right?
But were they?
This is my point.
So.
This is my point.
Non-gay people who thought gay people might have been offended had to change it.
So, to my point, how many Indian Americans were offended by the...
I can't comment on that.
No, but how many... No, but what I'm saying is that how many were offended by a lolly sold in Australia called Redskins that then got its name changed to Red Rippers? My point is... Allens need to go to woke school. And I'm sure a whole lot of people do because we can all woke the fuck out of each other. But if you're going to go from something that is offensive to somebody, don't transition it to a serial killer because that's not okay. Be better than that. That's atrocious. So Allens need to go to woke school, similarly to the Painters and Dockers went to nude school. So that's my first one.
That was the connection to nude school. It took me a while to get there, right?
Yeah. So, that was it. Sorry, I'm not comfortable with 1980s Soviet Russia who thinks that they don't have serial killers.
Neither were a lot of people, but yeah, go on.
A lot of people don't have the voice to discuss this right now. So you can laugh at that, okay. But I'm just going to say that I'm going to say what I think and hopefully others agree. If not,
I just mean that everything that came out in media in the 1980s, Carla, correct me if I'm wrong, the Russians were the enemy on everything.
Yeah.
Top Gun, everything. Didn't
matter.
One was comfortable with 1980s Russia. Anyway, go ahead.
It's an excellent point. The bit that I've been struggling with is the fact that also what's going on at the moment in between Russia and Ukraine has hit home for me as I've gone through this, right? So I don't say that lightly. I just go, I'm not okay with what was going on then. I don't like a government that says this is not happening whilst clearly it is. And when people say to them, no, it is happening, they go, let's hide it. I'm not okay with that. We can call that 1984's Soviet Union. We can call it Russia nowadays. We can call it a number of political regimes around the globe. I am not okay with it. I don't know how to sentence that other than to say that I just want to call it out because I feel like it's coming back with fades. Chikatilo, like how do you sentence someone like that? There is no cometh uppance. There's no cometh uppance for him, right? He said I did it. He said I didn't do it. Maybe I did. I might have done that. Blah blah blah. I think honestly, just die. I probably, if I could change something, I would have taken the cage away and allowed
Public flogging.
the gallery to have their way, and then let's have the trial because he did it. He did every bit of it and a whole lot more. Maybe a little bit of, cheese grater ballsack action. Maybe that would go well for Chikatilo whilst he's in court being berated by the gallery. Probably that's it from me.
Okay. Well, that has been the most extraordinary 2 episodes. So well done, Clarky. I'm going to have to revisit what I'm doing next time, and we're going to go back to something exceptionally light.
I feel like you said it, You created this monster.
Oh, yeah. It's all
And you
my
delivered.
fault. Yeah.
That was unbelievable.
Good job. All right. Well, thank you very much. And as we say every week, miss you already.
Love you long time. Bye.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Ta-da!
Thanks for listening to Trial by Wine. You can contact us at trialbywine@gmail.com. Please rate, review and subscribe to Trial by Wine on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com, Trial by Wine, or visit our website www.trialbywine.com to donate to us. Your support will help us cover many more cases and apply wacky sentences. We really appreciate you listening and hope you tell everyone about us. Our cover art is by John Christo and music is by Beauchamp from pixabay.com.